Hello guys, and welcome to part 3 of my videos looking at my scale model stash. Part 1 was 1/35th scale armour models. Part 2 was aircraft, ships, sci-fi and trains. And this is all about cars. Primarily these are F1 car model kits, but not all of them are. I put a couple of chapter markers down the bottom in case you want to skip to any particular location. I have been an F1 fan for many years. I was even lucky enough to marshal at the F1 in Singapore a couple of years ago, twice in a row, before COVID. So yeah, basically any F1 model kit that I see, I tend to snap up. So without further ado, let's get started. First up, we've got a series of 1/24th scale kits from Hasegawa. This is the Zakspeed Yamaha ZK891 from the 1989 F1 World Championship. It's an old tooling which is still being produced, I think, although mine is also an old production of it. You can see the box, the instructions, and even what looks like some of the plastic parts have gone a little bit yellow. Also turned yellow is the decals, but luckily I snagged a new sheet there for those. That replacement sheet doesn't include the white solid areas, but that's absolutely fine. I can always mask those off. I would do anyway, probably. So looking at the instructions, this is very old school style instructions. It's kind of black, white and red. The construction sequence is similar to any F1 car kit, really. You typically build the engine and the seat first and then slot everything together. I think with any car kit, there's always a bit of independence from the instructions in terms of painting sequence in particular, because there's obviously a lot of sub-sequences, sub-assemblies to build. Moving on, another Hasegawa kit, and again not a particularly well-known car. This is the Larousse LC90 from the 1990 F1 season. Again, not particularly an F1 car that I'm absolutely mad about, but it's an F1 car, so I do like it. You can see, looking at some of the parts here, they'll need a bit of cleanup. Some of them are a little bit rough. They won't give you that smooth finish if you just prime these parts straight away. But with a bit of sanding and a bit of work, I think they'll come out quite nicely. This one is an old tool, just like the previous kit, but it's a more recent pressing of that tool. And so the decals are nice straight out of the box. They haven't yellowed or anything. Staying with Hasegawa, and this is one of their more recent kits. The Jordan 191 in 1/20th scale from Tamiya is a lovely kit. You can convert that into a 192, but when Hasegawa brought out this Jordan 192, I thought I'd just go for that. It's very similar to the 191. Lovely looking car, unfortunately not as successful as the 191. I did also fall a little bit for Hasegawa's marketing here, and I bought the 192 shakedown version, which is basically the same kit, but it's in the green scheme that the 191 was in. Presumably the sponsorship hadn't been finalised there for the 192. So yeah, I will probably build these two kits together because they're identical. The instructions are identical, except for the painting and the decals. But what can I say? It will look nice and unique on my shelf. Well, apart from all the other people that bought the same kit, of course. Moving away from Hasegawa, Revell have done a series of F1 kits. I've built a couple of them so far, including one on the channel if I remember correctly. They're not the world's best F1 kits, but they do produce cars that nobody else does. That tends to be the thing with F1, because of the licensing, only one company tends to produce each car. So here I've got the Renault R23. Not much to say about it. Let's have a quick look inside if we can. The decals are in here somewhere. Let's have a look. I think it has decals for the solid parts. Yes, it does. So that will be painted blue in that case, with the yellow over the side areas. It will be a little bit hard to paint and mask those side areas. It would be possible. You'd have to paint the stripes in the dark colour first, mask those off, then go over with the blue and the yellow. It's possible, but I'll probably just use the decals. Another one here, this is Jensen Button's MP425. For some of these cars, I don't really know why, but Revell made versions for individual drivers rather than just having both drivers, both numbers in the same kit. No idea why they did that, but this is the Jensen Button specific version. And then finally, a fairly rare kit to get hold of from Revell. This is the Sauber Petronas C22. This is a lovely car. I love the colour scheme here. Quite a tricky one to make. The very light coral blue colour there is provided as a decal. However, I don't think they provide it for all parts. I think they only provide it for the top of the side pod, but not for the front wing end plates. So that will be an interesting one. Moving on to one of the more prolific makers of 1/20th scale F1 cars, of course that's Tamiya. I've built a couple of these on the channel for you already. In this case we have the Tyrrell P34, most famously known as the six-wheeler. This is the 1977 version. I also have the 1976 version. Again, virtually the same kit, but not quite. There are a few differences in the engine at the back, and with the front wing as well. And of course the colour scheme is different. This version is the 50th anniversary version, and it's been reboxed, but it also has some photo etch inside, which is a nice addition. You don't normally get that with Tamiya kits. Now if we have a look through here, we can find the photo etch. And you'll see here, rather than having just a few parts for the engine, we've got all the end plates for the rear wing and the front wing as photo etch. And that will make a big difference to the realism, so I'm really happy about that. We've got the radiator grills there as well. That's going to look very nice. Sticking with Tamiya, and this is the Tyrrell Yamaha 023. I've got two of these kits. They're identical. The reason I have two is because the replacement decal sheet here has two lovely liveries. We have the early season version, I think it was, which is the overall blue Nokia sponsorship, and then the main version, which was used for most of the season, which has that white stripe at the bottom. Now I got these replacement decals because the kit decals were a bit yellow and faded, but with a combination of these replacement decals and the two sets of kit decals, I should be able to build cars in both versions, which will be very nice. I always like things like that where you can build a slightly less common version of a car or a kit or something. Moving swiftly on to the FW07. This car was first used in the 1979 F1 season, and I strongly suspect that this kit was not made a particularly long time after that. I got this one on eBay. The seller had lost the instructions, but he had included a photocopied version which are in Japanese, but I think I can work it out. We also get the driver figure in this kit. With Tamiya kits, it tends to be that if you see the driver on the box, they are included in the kit. And of course, with the old tired decals there, I do have a replacement set. Next up, a lovely kit which I've wanted to build for a long time, but I was held back by the fact that the decals had yellowed. I'll show you those in a minute. This is the 1991 Lotus. It was driven by Julian Bailey, Mika Hakkinen and Johnny Herbert that season. It was not a successful car at all, but I'm still really a fan of it. If we look at these decals here, you'll see what I mean. They might not look too bad, but you can see that white stripe on the rear wing, for example, is faded and horrible. And the same thing with some of those logos, the Tommy Hilfiger and the Tamiya logos, the white has gone yellow. And it was just really difficult to source replacement decals for it. Eventually I found some. I forget where I got these from, but basically it was somebody designing and printing them themselves at home. And I mean, they're okay, but you can see there a definite sort of printer pattern in those solid green areas. And I knew that if I put these on the kit, I wouldn't be happy with it. It just wouldn't look quite right. The green's not quite as vibrant as I'd like, and the texture's just not something I'd like either. And then luckily, someone whose decals I've used previously, IndyCar decals, recently developed their own set of decals for this kit. And these are much better. I've used IndyCar decals quite a lot before. They've got a great service. They're really, really nice, high quality decals. And they do lots of replacements for old kits like this. So that can now go onto my build list as something I'm able to build and paint and decal. Sticking with Lotus, we've got the 107. This is very similar to the 102 D in terms of its paint scheme. I built that before I even started this channel. Maybe when I build these models I'll show you all of them together. But a lovely little colour scheme there. Again, replacement decals were needed, but they were quite easy to acquire. And they use quite a nice system where you paint the base colour and then that sort of counter shading almost is taken care of by the decals. Still in the Lotus camp, we've got the 107B. Now I have built the 107B before I started this channel. The reason I've got another copy is I was wanting to convert this to the 107C, which is a 1994 version of the kit. I had the decals to do it. It's got this colour scheme here. And as you can see in the kit, I got fairly far. I got it sort of constructed and some initial painting. Not a great job. I was still using spray cans a lot of the time back then. But I've made one fairly fundamental mistake here, which is that the top of the side pods there extend much further back and square off just over the rear suspension in the 107C, and I haven't made that change. If I show you the decal sheet again, you'll see that. There we go, you can just about see that there at the rear. That yellow area extends to the back and squares off. So I need to decide whether to ignore that, which I can't really do because of the way the decals go on, or rip this apart and use some styrene card or something to try to extend that. My modelling skills are better than they were when I first tried this, but I'm still not 100% confident I'll get away with it. But who knows, I mean, if I don't try, the kit's going to sit in a box anyway, half built, so to a certain extent I don't have much to lose. Sticking with Lotus, but going back a little bit, and it's another kind of double kit situation. We've got the Type 79 from 1978 in that classic John Player Special livery. Of course, Tamiya's box doesn't show that because it's cigarette advertising. And then I've got its twin, which is the 1979 version, the Martini version. Ironically, it's okay to advertise alcohol, but not cigarettes. The only thing holding me up from building this kit is I haven't been able to find the JPS decals for the 1979 version. I would build these two kits in a dual build. They're virtually identical, although there are some small differences to the engine. But I can't bring myself to build the 78 version without the JPS. It just isn't the same. You know, that classic gloss black with gold lettering finish just isn't the same without the JPS. Next up, we've got the Williams FW24. A nice looking kit. Again, not one that really, you know, I'm in love with, but I got this for a fantastic price. I don't know how, but I got this for less than £20 on eBay. And it included a Tamiya magazine booklet showing you how to build this kit and showing you what it can look like. So, you know, I'm a sucker for a bargain, what can I say? Going way back, both in terms of the car itself and the kit, the Ferrari 312 T3 from the 1978 F1 season. And this is from before I was born. This is an old release of the kit, but if I pop inside here, look at this chrome work. This looks lovely. Really, really nice. The only thing I might say, actually, if you look at period photos, the front wing looks to be more aluminium than chrome, and therefore nowhere near that reflective, nowhere near that shiny at all. But, well, it does look very nice. It's got that kind of classic shape of F1 cars from the era, as well as just looking at this bodywork here and just thinking how dangerous these things must be. You look at the instructions and everything around the driver is just aluminium. There's very, very little in terms of strength to these cars. But yeah, this is definitely a kit that I want to build. Moving forward a couple of years, this is the Renault RE30B from the 1982 F1 season. Not a particularly successful car. It was driven by Arnoux and Prost. It did achieve a couple of victories, but it also robbed Alain Prost of 3 victories when he was basically in sight of the checkered flag at Monaco, in Austria and in France. So not a reliable car at all. And we seem to be jumping back and forward in time here. This is the 1965 Honda RA272, although the kit is much more recent than that. If I'm correct, I think this was tooled by Tamiya in the mid-90s, 96 I think it was. A lovely little kit. It's quite nice looking inside the box here. We've got these tyres with the Goodyear logos pre-printed in gold, which is really nice. And much nicer than those horrible dry transfers that you get in a lot of the Tamiya kits for the logos. Lots of detail at the back, of course, because you've got that exposed engine. Very simple livery. But if the Lotus 25 that I built a long time ago is anything to go by, there will be lots of detail on this, and it will take a lot more work than the box art image might suggest. Moving away from Tamiya kits, and this is the Ebro 1/20th scale Lotus Type 72C. And of course this car is perhaps infamous as being the car that was driven by Jochen Rindt when he was killed in Monza in 1970. The only driver to ever win the World Championship posthumously. And he was driving this car with the wings removed at Monza when the brakes failed going into the Parabolica, which sent him into the Armco. But he was so far ahead in the points that nobody was able to catch him and pass him by the end of the season. Looking inside the box, and the first thing we notice is this huge decal sheet. We've got a little sheet here showing us the different numbers and so on for the different races the car was entered in. And then some fairly clear instructions actually here from Ebro. As well as multicoloured moulded plastic and some nice rain looking tyres there, or groove tyres at least. Next up we have a couple of Fujimi kits. This is the Ferrari F187s from, not surprisingly, the 1987 F1 season. The 1988 car was quite similar to this as well. It's a nice looking kit. I've built some other Fujimi kits before. The FW16 I've built. And just love the look of these 80s F1 cars. Next up, a very battered kit. I saw this on a shelf in a model shop in South Korea and I had to grab it. 80s and 90s F1 cars are really what I'm into, and this is a very unusual kit to find. You know, the footwork Mugen Honda was not a particularly successful car at all, so it's quite surprising a kit was made of it, but I'm glad because I like it. It's quite nice inside, and the decals in this one are still in decent condition despite the outside of the box. A much more modern kit here. This is the Ferrari F203. I'm not particularly a fan of Ferrari. I only bought this kit because I wanted to convert it into the Sauber C23 with the decal conversion sheet. But then I managed to find that Revell Sauber C22 that I showed you earlier. I thought, do I want to have another version of a very similar looking car? So I might sell this kit, or I might build it. I haven't quite decided yet. One kit I'm definitely not going to sell is this Lotus 97T for the 1985 F1 season. This is another Fujimi kit. This time I did manage to buy the extra John Player Special decals for this, so I can complete it in its sort of correct livery. I know in the 1985 season they did have some races that banned tobacco advertising, but most of the time the John Player Special logos were there. This of course was the car that gave Ayrton Senna his first win in Portugal, and I imagine as I build this that one of the challenges will be getting a good finish on that lovely gloss black paintwork, but I'll give it my best shot. Another Senna car coming up next, and in fact a few Senna cars. This is the Tamiya McLaren MP44. This is from the 1988 F1 season. At the hands of Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna, this car won 15 out of 16 races that season. It's got, of course, the classic Marlboro white and orange livery on this, as has the next car in my stash, the MP45B, which is a successor to the MP44. I do have tobacco decals for both of these cars as well. Carrying on, we've got another McLaren, the MP46 from 1991, and of course this is where Senna won his third and final Formula One world title. It'll be interesting here to see how the Fujimi McLarens compare with the Tamiya ones, as they are much newer. I've then got the MP47 from the 1992 season. Again, the livery for all of these McLarens is that classic Marlboro orange, and for the majority of them, if not all of them, I will use the tobacco decals rather than the non-tobacco versions. I might do one non-tobacco version since they did exist in real life as well. I've also got this McLaren MP42B from 1985. This is the BMAX/Aoshima model, and I've got to say I'm a little bit disappointed by this. Not by the kit itself. From what I can tell, the moulding and the details look fine. The disappointing thing here for me is the decals. In a way, I suppose they haven't been misleading because they're not shown on the box art, but in addition to not getting the tobacco decals, which is fairly standard, you also fail to get the Michelin, the Goodyear, or the Shell decals. And that obviously makes a big difference because it really detracts from the car. The car looks a lot plainer when all those white areas are without sponsors' logos. I'm really not happy about that. It wasn't obvious to me, and I think I probably wouldn't have bought this kit if I'd known that in advance. Looking at some reference photos, there do seem to be some versions without some of those logos, but I still do need the Shell ones, definitely. And I can't seem to find a replacement set online. The other thing is, depending on which photos I'm looking at, this doesn't seem to be the correct rear wing for Monaco. I've seen a couple of reference photos where the rear wing has extended side sections to generate more downforce, and I'm not 100% sure whether that's correct or not for Monaco, so I need to do a bit more research into that. But yeah, overall disappointed with the decals on this one. As a bit of a random insertion here, I also have this Tamiya Motorsports team set, which has got various sort of pit lane figures and so on, clearly dressed in sort of 70s, maybe 80s gear. So this could perhaps go well with some of the older kits, the Ferrari and the Renault perhaps. You do get a few sort of bits of pit lane equipment, a few sections of Armco barrier and so on there as well. The figures are not the best moulded figures in the world. It's very sort of typical of the older Tamiya style, but it's a nice little novelty of this set anyway. Another McLaren I have in my collection is the 1976 M23, which was the James Hunt car. Of course, Hunt won the World Championship that year. As you can see from here, I'm not quite sure why I've stuck these pieces to some cardboard or some blue tack, but it does look like I started to build this kit, so again, something that I need to get stuck into sometime in the future. And finally, the last McLaren I have is the MP413. Now, I've already built this car in this livery, and I've already built it a second time in the papaya orange press version livery. So why do I have not just one, but two more copies of this MP413? Well, simple answer. Here's the first answer, the Minardi M01 from the 1999 season. So this is a set of decals from Studio 27, and it's designed to convert that MP413 into this Minardi. Again, the Minardi is not a particularly successful car, not particularly popular, but I just like the idea of having a car in my collection that a lot of people won't have. Something slightly unique there. So that's where one of my MP413s will be going. The second one will be going with these decals, which are for the 2001 Jaguar R2. Now, there seemed to be a bit of debate online whether there was a Ferrari kit or this MP413 that made the best base kit for these decals, but this is the kit I went for in the end. I realise it won't be a complete conversion, it won't be mainly sort of a paint scheme and livery version, but nevertheless, I think if I can get the right colour metallic green paint, I think that will look beautiful on that MP413. Talking of conversions, I have this Benetton Ford B192, and again I built it like this before I even started my channel, but again I've got two copies of this. Why do I have two more copies? Well, one of them is going to be converted into this, the B194, Again, I know the conversion's not a strictly accurate conversion. As well as some changes to the wings, there's also a change to the length of the car, but I think nonetheless this will give us a fairly decent conversion. And the reason I've got another copy of the B192 after that is for this. This is the Pacific PR01 from 1994. Again, not a very successful car, but really quite a nice looking car. I love this colour here. I'm not quite sure if you call it a grey or a matte aluminium. I need to decide that before I build it, but it does look lovely. And this car was based largely on the Benetton B192, so it's no wonder then we've got these conversion decals. The great thing about these decals from Studio 27 is they do tend to include lots of variations. So you can see here this car has different sponsors throughout the season, and those are reflected in the decals. Talking of conversions, I bought a while ago this FW13B, which is not really one of my favourite Williams cars. I just don't like the look of it. It wasn't a particularly successful car. I wasn't a huge fan of Thierry Boutsen or Riccardo Patrese. But I bought this kit primarily because I thought it could be converted with these decals into the Arrows A11. Of course, the Arrows A11 looks very close to the footwork, which I talked about earlier, but I didn't actually have the footwork at the time I bought these decals. You can see on the back of this decal sheet here, it just shows with the dotted lines the types of changes that might need to be made to that car in order to convert it into the new car. So we need to change the side pod length there, and also a bit with the engine cover as well. While we're talking of conversions, I showed you my McLaren MP4-5 earlier. I have another copy of that as well. You guessed it, for a conversion. This time into the Ligier GS33 from the 1990 season. And again, I really like this deep sort of blue Lotto camo scheme here. And again, it's not a car you see a lot of. It wasn't a particularly successful car. So that will look great, I think. I really am looking forward to having some of these sort of backmarker teams in my F1 collection. Finally, on the F1 front, a very rare model. I'd spent ages trying to get hold of this. They went for hundreds of dollars online. And then in a space of about a month, I found two of them very cheaply, so I snapped them up. This is the Academy 1/20th scale Benetton B195, so from the 1995 season, of course. The first one I will build as that car, and I have a spare set of decals for it because the kit decals were no good. And the second one I will be converting. These are decals for the Ligier JS43 from the 1996 season. You can also get some conversion decals for the JS41, but I went for this slot instead. Right, now moving away from Formula 1 cars, and I'll move to a very strange kit I've got. It's the Nissan Cedric / Gloria. And the reason I bought this is because I wanted to have it as an abandoned civilian vehicle in a zombie style diorama. It was going to go in the zombie diorama I made before, but once I had that all set up, I realised there was just no space for it on the base, so I didn't even build this kit. But I do have plans for something similar in the future, so perhaps it will find its way in there. Back to motorsports and back to Hasegawa, and we've got this beautiful Jaguar XJR8. I've already built the Castrol version of this, but this is the silk cut version. The most pleasing thing for me about this kit is the box art doesn't show it, but if we look inside, we do have the silk cut tobacco decals. That's really helpful because it means I won't have to try to colour match the decals and any paint I put down. The Castrol version was a fairly straightforward build, and I'm sure this one will be similar. Back to Grand Prix cars, but not Formula 1 because Formula 1 wasn't around in those days. This is the Auto Union Type D from the 1939 Grand Prix racing season. This is by Revell in 1/32nd scale. A fairly basic kit. Nevertheless, I am looking forward to building it and to getting that silver arrows on my display shelf. In a similar vein, we have this Bentley 4.5 litre blower, 1/24 scale, again from Revell. I think I've seen a 1/12 version of this kit built, but this is the smaller version. British Racing Green, of course. And then finally, a Matchbox Bucati Type 59. This is an old kit that I picked up recently on eBay. I love that little display window there in the back of the box. So again, this is a pre-war Grand Prix car. 1934 I think this one was. I do like these old style cars. I wish there were more kits of them. There are a few out there, but they're very expensive. Some of the the very expensive hero models and things like that, which I'm not going to drop money on at the moment. Okay, and for my final couple of kits, let's drop down to 1/43rd scale. And we have here the Footwork Hart FA16 from the 1995 Formula 1 season. These are white metal kits. This one is from Tomeo. This is quite typical of these kits. The boxes are really small, so the instructions and even the decals tend to be rolled up inside. Here we can see a picture of the real car. And then we tend to have the main chassis in one metal piece, which hopefully I can get out of that bag. Like so. With that detachable under tray. They need quite a lot of cleanup just to get rid of that sort of surface corrosion there before building. And you can see inside I've got rubber tyres, we've got some photo etch and a few of the thin metal parts as well. Very fiddly to build. I haven't actually finished one of these yet, but I am looking forward to doing so. I've got a few of the kits like it. So we've got the Stuart Ford SF3. We've got the Minardi M191, which is probably one of my favourite colour schemes, that yellow, white and black scheme. You can't really get it anywhere else. Studio 27 do a Minardi, but you're looking at a few $100s. Then we've got the Sauber C13 with that lovely black livery. And finally one which I showed you recently on my YouTube community tab, the Brabham BT60B, driven by Damon Hill in the 1992 F1 season. This is a resin kit, still 1/43rd scale. You can get a 1/20th resin version of this by Wolf Models, but they are rarer than hen's teeth. So there we go guys, quite a few F1 cars and other cars there in my collection. I really do like all of these cars, I can't wait to build them, but at the same time I do realise that it takes a lot of time and effort to build a really good looking Grand Prix car. So I don't want to rush it and muck up the paintwork and just muck up the build in general really. As for which one I'm going to build next, I really don't know. I really do like the ones which could be dual builds, so the Lotus 79s or the Tyrrell 023s, they could be quite good ones to start with. But yeah, who knows. If you have any suggestions, you can feel free to leave them in the comments below. Equally, if you'd like to see a in-depth look at any of these kits, like an inbox preview or something, also leave a comment below. I do read all my comments and I do respond to the majority of them. Apart from that, it remains just for me to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. This is really the end of my stash videos. I haven't shown you any of the figure kits I've got in my stash, and unless there's a huge demand, I don't think I'm going to, mainly because you will typically see the figures in conjunction with some armour kits when I get around to building them. So guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, take care and have fun modelling.